I'd like to welcome everyone to the 64th EOF Implementers Call on the 22nd of January. I have the agenda on the ETH Magicians, copied off of the agenda that was in the call. I don't think there's been any late ads in the past 5 minutes. Yeah, I think we're all up there. So the first item of business is the testing update. Mario, you want to kick us off?
Yes, sure. So I just merged the two PRs that were like hanging from like a couple of weeks ago, and all seems good. For the .NET 6 updates, I think we should wait for everything to settle before refilling the EOF tests on top of that. But I think we're pretty close to finishing up the requirements for DevNet 6. So yeah, after that, I think we should just refill EOF and just yeah, make another release of EOF on top of that. But yeah, apart from that, I don't think there's anything else from my side.
Okay. Yeah, I've kind of had a
The,
similar. Oh,
sorry, there's one detail about the release, which is the EOF wrap, which we all love, and so it's relying on EVM1, working to transform the blockchain tests from legacy to EOF, and I think that might not work until until EVM1 is on Pectra DevNet 5. So I guess the simple solution is to just turn it off, which is I think one line in the CI setup. So that's not included in that particular release until we get our stuff sorted.
Yeah. Do you guys see like EVM1 is gonna take much longer after DevNet 6 is finalized, or maybe we can just wait for EVM1 to be ready
Oh, 6.
on top of?
We need to get to 5, I guess. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
we're making progress, and but I'm not sure how much time do we need.
I'm
I
fine
think the
either
only
way.
missing feature is 7702. So I think I plan to start reviewing this probably in next days. I'm not sure what in DevNet 6 is actually, but I imagine it's not a big change.
Yeah,
The
it's only
plugin
the
content.
7702. Yeah, it's 7702. The change for the
Okay.
external contracts. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
should
it.
be simple enough.
I think the reason they did the DevNet 6 is they didn't want to go straight to shadow testing without a visible success.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the plan right now is we cannot make the release for DevNet 5 with the 7702's changes because it would break the clients on DevNet 5 right now. So the plan, even if we don't have DevNet 6, we're gonna label them differently. So we're gonna have like DevNet 5 with everything that doesn't break on the current DevNet 5 releases, and we're gonna make a release either DevNet 5 or a proper stable release with the 7702 changes. So yeah, what I was meaning is that we can wait until we have those .NET 6 changes finalized, and then we can make the release for EOF. So whatever the case is, the EOF release I think should contain the 7702 changes, in my opinion.
So we could think of DevNet 6 as DevNet 5.1, except we only do one number, so it's 6.
Yeah, basically. Yep.
All right. Anything testing related? Anything East related?
If anyone is missing a review, please just ping me. There's a lot of PRs open right now that I'm trying to get merged for DevNet 6. But yeah, if something slipped through the cracks, please just ping me. I'll try to review.
Yeah, I'm slowly, but hopefully in like finite amount of time, I'm trying to move all the remaining validation tests from Arch repository to East. So that's where the pull requests come from on my side. I think it looks manageable in the way I'm doing this, so just wanted to mention that.
Okay. For fuzzings, there's no new published findings, and published is important. I don't consider it a trophy until there is an EAST test written. There's one thing I'm working on with Geth that I think will become a trophy, and there'll be a test out there relating to EOF Create. That'll be coming next week or in 2 weeks. And another problem we're getting into with fuzzing is that fuzzing provides useless signal if the clients are not on the same Pectra DevNet level. So it really limits the number of clients I can pair up. If there's one difference, if one has Pectra 4, 5, or 6, or if there's even a bug in 5 or 6, the fuzzing tends to find it if it can manifest in the EVM, which I guess is evidence the fuzzing's working, but it makes it hard. One thing I did do over Christmas is I had I had local builds of every EVM that had EOF up to DevNet 4 level, and I was able to run the fuzzer for about a week solid with no findings with the tests that I had. Now the tests aren't complete. This new finding was off of something relating to EOF Create and the data load operations. So I didn't have that test running last week. So there might be some other bugs out there, but we're pretty good right now. So any other testing updates before we move on to client updates? All right, so let's move on to client compiler updates.
Actually, just to follow up on the testing. So ideally, you'd want everybody to be on the latest DevNet with EOF. Is that correct?
Yes, that's going to be the standard for Osaka 0. But until everyone gets their regular clients up to 6, there's not much value in pushing EOF on top of it, which is why I'm not pushing it in this meeting, because getting everyone to 6 is more important for getting Pectra out the door, and getting Pectra out the door is going to get us progressing on EOF faster. Pectra has to ship before we can ship EOF, so that's why I'm not pushing too hard.
Okay. Yep.
Just to clarify a little bit, so DevNet 6 is not confirmed. It's just the term that I'm using for this breaking change that is going to be end up in Prague. But regardless of whether DevNet 6 happens or not, we should like target for EOF to be on top of that change, that breaking change. Yeah.
Yep.
One more question for the fuzzing. Do you use state test for it, and do you require those new fields that we talked about in JSON format?
So, probably I use the state tests that are generated by EAST as the seed for the generators. I run it through. There's a couple of flags I can throw on to the test generation that will print out one test per file. That takes a few hours just because of how fast Python is, the way it's set up, which isn't a problem. I just set it to run overnight and then come back and I have 2,000 seed files that I can generate off of. There may or may not be new fields in there that need to be interpreted. I know that did break Besu. I had to regenerate and resync Besu. So I think the new fields are going to slowly start coming in. But if your state test runner runs against the current Pectra DevNets, you should be fine.
Okay, cool. And additionally, the state output, basically the JSON that was outputted, should we add new fields and require that for the fuzzing to happen?
Yes. Let me write this
Okay.
down. Realize new fields.
Okay, I need to add those, and yeah, okay. So DevNet 6 or whatever we call it, add new fields to the JSON output tracer, and maybe add new fields to the state test JSON if needed.
Yeah, let me find EIP 7756. And this is probably a good time to have that discussion. of all the fields, the most important one second EIP 756. So of all the fields, the most important change here that people need to do for their for what they've done for the EOF tracing is the way we're handling PC. I've gone back and forth with this with several implementations. And I think what needs to be done is the PC needs to be zeroed against the beginning of the container. So your first line, your first execution won't be PC 0 in EOF. It'll be like 19, 20, 21, 22, depending upon how big your header is. So section 0, byte 0 is going to be at a higher number. And my rationale for this is either we would need to require that everyone then put the section number in there and to fuzz, and you probably need function depth too. This is needed. I think function depth is something that I'm going to require for fuzzing because of the way get handles its duplicates. But we would need to require people to have section and function depth. So function depth, I think, is going to become a required one. That should just be an easy thing to put into it. But from that with PC, what GoEVM lab strips out is it needs the PC, the opcode number, the gas remaining, and the depth. And those are the required fields that it does its fuzzing off of when it's opcode level. There's another mode where it doesn't do the per line tracing, where it just checks the end state at the end, where it checks the state hash at the end. It's faster. That's the stuff that I ran over Christmas. Didn't do the line by line because not everyone had it in a way that it wouldn't create diffs. But one of the things that I've seen that the fuzzing might miss is it might detect a change, but it won't commit it to anything that would change the state. So we would have a fuzzing difference that would slip through because we're not doing line by line fuzzing checking. So I think that's the big issue there. Why we want to get line by line checking is because it's higher quality. It's going to find bugs quicker rather than finding the bug and accidentally get that bug into some way that it's persisted. The way we have state tests written, there's a high likelihood it's going to be persisted because we always record all the data and check the data at the end. But when it's a purely generated piece of code, there's no guarantee on that. So as far as the recommendation ones, if we can get PC to zero off the container start, and make sure everyone has function depth in there. And that's even though I have it listed as optional here, I'm probably going to move it up to required if present based on that. Let me update that. Yeah, I wish I had tabs here. All right. Really last call, testing, fuzzing. Any more questions? All right, client and compiler updates. Anyone want to go first, volunteer?
No change since last call for Nelomide.
Same with Besu, no change.
EVM1, no change, I think.
Same bitrate.
Erigo, no changes as well.
Okay, Solidity, anything?
Basically not much change from last time. Like we're working on wrapping it up and releasing, but in terms of like functionality, we merged like all we needed, and we're mostly working on like having it tested. And we also like kind of trying to decide on the next milestone, like which, because like we're going to do some part of next features in Q1, and like the question is like which specific one, like whether we would like to have like optimizations ready or like properly support like all outputs or assembly import and stuff like that.
All right. Viper, do we have Viper on the call? Charles?
Yeah, similar. Not much change. Although I was wondering if there's going to be EOF support in PyVM, or if anybody is interested in shipping that.
Is PyVM different from EELS?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess we need to talk to the snake charmers on that. Are they the ones that own PyVM?
Yep.
Yes.
I think they also, so we have multiple backends in our test harness, and PyVM is one of them. And I suppose they're probably a little nervous about implementing it.
Right. So EELS does have a fork that supports it. It's not branched off of the current EELS. So there are some changes with some of the types that cause problems. If you're mixing current and old EELS code, that's something I'm running into with East. But yeah, it appears to generate the test cases correctly right now. So okay. So yeah, we'll need to ping the snake charmers and assuage their fears. They might. I mean, there's enough. All the landmines are known, so it shouldn't be too hard for them to come and ask for help if things get stuck.
I have a meeting with them the next couple of days. I can try to ask them and report
Okay.
back.
All right. Cool. Any other client or compiler updates before we go on to spec and other issues? All right. The 3 items we got listed today are EOF metadata, cross-chain addresses, and Osaka 1 spec changes. Anything we need to add on this list before we start going through it? Cool. So let's start with EOF metadata. We had Peter.
Yeah, so I did a quick spike trying to implement this in EVM 1 and have some tests in East. So far, so good. It's very preliminary, but it seems to work. And there isn't really much to say, maybe, but it is slightly tricky because, well, with 2 optional kinds of sections, it does it is a bit, I mean, more complicated than it used to be. And it also, the metadata section is like a new, it's pretty specific. It is not like any other section because it's not like the type section because it's optional. It's not like the code section because there's only one. And it is not like the data section because if it's not there, then it is not mentioned in the header. So it's like it needs new paths to handle this thing. But I'm not sure if we can improve the design so it's not problematic, because obviously we want it to be optional. And yeah. And then, so I've so far written only validation East tests. And then I'm thinking for the execution tests, it would be nice to be just parameterize all or many existing tests with, hey, add a metadata section to this container and then just run the same test. Because for the majority of cases, well, the execution is the same. It might only differ in gas cost of the deployment. And I think that's it.
Sounds good. I mean, we ideally we should select like a subset instead of just refilling every
because
single
it
test.
will be huge otherwise. Yes.
Yeah. So we can go either way with a marker, for example. We can create a marker
Yeah, a marker.
for that, or let me think if I can think of anything else. But I think marker should be the way to go. Yeah.
I mean, if this doesn't make you scared, then I think it's good.
No,
That's
it
what I
sounds
was
it sounds
hoping to
good.
hear.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
No, it sounds fine. But yeah, I would suggest maybe just a subset of the tests, just relevant tests, and then just going with a marker just to make it easier.
Okay.
Yeah, I can help you with that if you want.
No, I think it's way too early to do this.
I
But
wouldn't bring
let's
it
just
into
keep it.
East. I wouldn't bring it into East until we have blessing from ACDC. I mean,
No,
ACD.
of course. I mean, we cannot because we would need to come up with a fork that it lives in.
Yeah.
Until
And
it's confirmed.
that talk's not going to happen for about a month. We're not going to discuss Osaka things for a month.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I understand. This was just like, trying to tread the minefield and see if there's any mines left there. But it seems not. I mean, one thing that is kind of troubling that if we keep adding optional sections to the header, this is gonna be a bit maybe unwieldy. For example, I was thinking, I mean, we cannot say that we should not have a metadata section on a container on a container that has a container section, because obviously we want to have a metadata section on a factory, for example, right? But for example, if we could rule out a metadata section, hold on. Oh no, that doesn't work. I had something in mind, but I think it doesn't work. So, I mean, the less optional sections we have, it's gonna be better, I guess. That's the gist of it.
But my concern on that subject is that the future of expansion might be more optional sections, or we need to do a major version number that would impact parsing. So that's something to think about, is the cost of new sections as a means of expansion.
Yeah, I'm just leaving it here, and I think I'm done.
Okay.
Quick question I wrote in the chat. What about not making it optional? And whenever it's not used, you just say that the size is 0.
Yeah. So that would be nice. It would cost us 3 bytes for the 0 size. And it would also, I mean, the problem, maybe that's not a problem, maybe we should consider it, would be that having, I mean, it would definitely right now the EIP is like an add-on, and I mean, all containers that we have and produce and test and whatnot are valid with the add-on, and that would not be the case anymore if we require the metadata section. That's it. That maybe I'm overreacting on this. Maybe that's,
well, if we know
better.
now,
No, that's fine.
what sections we need to leave as 0, we could code them in. But yeah, I mean, we don't know what's going to show up in the future, so the new ones we add will have to be optional.
I mean, this is like, maybe if we are sure that it's going into Osaka, then we can make it obligatory. It's more like this, and then that would be a breaking change for EOF, but it would maybe it would be better, yes.
Okay. Any other comments on metadata section?
Maybe one question. Why do we need metadata? Could like Solidity Viper just use data?
So this is a request from the
nicer.
Sourceify team. Yeah, this is a request from the Sourceify team. The problems with putting it at the end is then it's hard to detect where the metadata exists when you append auxiliary data to it. This is a problem they have today when deploying contracts. When you apply class level data at the end that you would read via code copy. So putting it in a section isolates it. So most places will parse it and discard it. So it won't, and it also is data that cannot be loaded by the EVM, yet is still associated with the container. So which is kind of useful there in that sense.
Okay, makes sense. That's a good argument.
I mean, I've discussed this before, and there's other read-only sections in the EVM, so it could like just be a log. But this is all in the discussion thread on ETH Magicians.
Yeah, because other options are just to admit event while you do the contract. It's just a question of how people want to read it from the block explorers.
Yeah, it seems nicer to tie it to bytecode.
Yeah,
it turns
there
into
some argument
aesthetics.
from. Sorry.
Go ahead, Peter.
There was an argument I cannot really cite right now from the Sourceify team that it's really much better to have it just appended to the bytecode that's being verified in this case.
I think the argument was just that emitting a log or doing it in the init code is less, or there's no standard for it yet, so they can't rely on it. But if everybody, meaning the compilers, I guess, agreed to do it, then it might be okay, I think.
Oh, I think it was about not because if you, I guess, emit a log, then you need more infrastructure to read this log because you need to index.
Yeah, especially with
keep an index.
444s, people are trimming logs.
Oh, and this amplifies this, right?
And especially with stateless, you might not have access to the creation of it.
Yeah. I know. I remember.
Right.
Okay. Cool. All right, let's move on to the EOF TX create and cross-chain addresses. First, let's talk about EOF TX create. Looking into that.
Is this the hashing? Oh, this is the document. So, like a very brief reintroduction, there's been a discussion about the hashing schemes for EOF create, and then it sort of escalated to just thinking about the hashing schemes of EOF deployments in general, which is like how do we obtain the address of the deployed contract. And so we wrote up such a document that tries to list a few scenarios and also build these scenarios out of sort of building blocks, which are different combinations of solutions. And we have asked for feedback. And the aim of this is to decide whether we want to change the current spec, and also and then how do we change this spec? And yeah, does anyone has anyone gone through this document and has any comments, suggestions, or feedback?
So scenario 1B, irregular state change, right? At the same time, Dano has proposed an ERC, which seems to do the same thing, but it's not an irregular state change, if I understand correctly, right?
Right. That's kind of threading the needle there. One piece to put in here that's going to make ISCs viable, I think, is that we're talking about replacing the identity precompile and in general replacing the precompiles with actual contracts. So that opens the door to, as part of a fork, adding a contract to a chain, not necessarily changing the contract. Changing a contract to do something different to fix bugs is I think, the ISC that people would not want to see, and that opens the door to some really politically problematic issues. But if we're just adding a contract that has precedent for being there, I think that's going to be an easier 1B is going to be an easier thing to push with an irregular state change.
What do you mean by precedent for being there?
So let's go to Osaka's change list. GitHub, Ethereum, PM. Actually, let's go to EIPs. Requests, and this is going to be how do I find the ones that are
Are you what are you looking for?
What's Vitalik's username? vbuterin?
What you're looking for?
This one. So he's proposing 7666 for Osaka and EIP 7666. Is to EVMify the identity precompiled. And what this specifies is taking this code and publishing it to address 4. And this is from Vitalik. And so this, I think, is really going to change a lot of people's minds on the idea of, as part of a fork, taking a contract and pushing it out to a specific address where it doesn't exist before. Whereas because of people's experience with the DAO, there is a lot of knee-jerk reaction. I'm kind of in that camp where doing changes to the chain as part of a fork is a no-go because of the problems it caused. This should be an EOF contract. That would be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pitch. We should try that.
It's gonna be cheaper.
Yeah, let me add that to the notes. But yeah, so that there's other people pushing this for different similar reasons. We can set the path to no ISEs to be ISEs that add contracts are acceptable, and we still don't cross the barrier into ISEs that change state or change contracts. And those, I think, are where the real political drama lie. So I think this is slowly moving us there, but I think for reasons that we have to go to. And
so what you're saying is that there could be a path to getting these factory, or either this one factory or multiple factories, as
yes.
EVM, not precompiles. I don't know what to call them.
Pre-deploys.
Yeah. Okay. Pre-deploys. Yeah, that would be nice. Because I mean, I was looking at other similar things and say like, well, the existing system contracts, right? Like the beacon block routes, etc. They are deployed essentially using Nick's method, if I understand correctly.
Correct.
So what I was going to say is like, those are EIPs. So I don't understand why the factories would be an ERC. They're in that category. But if they can be just pre-deploys at the sort of hard-coded address, that would be much nicer.
Yeah. So I haven't actually shipped the ERC yet, so it could become an EIP. I think that's one of the reasons why I haven't deployed it, because some of the design's still up in the air. ASIC, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just keep a note that Vitalik was never against like irregular state changes in that sense, in the sense of introducing new code, not changing existing stuff. If you look at the old, like the original block hash EIP from him in EIP 210 several years ago, that was the same.
Okay.
I don't think he was part of like the discussions when the actual block hash stuff went in, and all could have decided to do the pre-deploy.
Yeah.
But I think you're correct that this EIP is a divider. So if it gets accepted, that definitely opens up the door to have irregular state changes like this. But it's a big if.
And I think the reason ACD went that way is there were some people who didn't want to pre-deploy to a specific address, so there was a way to get it on with Nick's method. So I think the people, rather than pushing the issue, decided to defer to the next method solution in the name of progress. But with this one, there is no way to next method a contract onto address 4. We have to do an IFC. So I think we have to have the discussion now on this.
Well, there's a way, but then you need quantum security as well.
Right.
Sorry, what do you mean? That I thought that the pre-draft ERC that I know you put together, that was a normal deployment, right?
That is a normal deployment, but to totally shift into a different, actually we are talking EOF create, TX create. So if this is a possibility, if we could put those contracts on chain as part of the transition, we could potentially get rid of 7720, I think, which is where we would change the context of a create transaction to allow EOF to be created. So if we have the ability to pre-deploy the EOF contracts, then we can require everyone to have to use TX create contracts to add their stuff rather than changing the contract creation. And without 7720, there's no way to nix method those onto the contract because they're EOF contracts.
Yeah, that would be very good. And it would also, having TX create, as it turns out, well, it's optimal in many aspects. Like it does pave the way to deterministic deployments, I guess. And also it is sorry, stuck. It's also AA compatible as the only, I think, option here. Which is it would allow smart contract wallets to just deploy arbitrary contracts. Period.
Right. Yeah. AA compatibility is why I think we need TX create. So
it's good to know there's strong arguments for this, because this would I guess close the discussion we have here. If we can get TX create in without friction, then it's good.
Yeah, I think like if TX create can get in, that's fine. Though I will say I don't really understand the AA point still. What do we mean by like that we want accounts to be able to deploy arbitrary contracts? What kind of scenario, what kind of use case?
That's still in the air, I remember.
So
well, I mean, go on.
I think that's to make AAs on the same level as a regular contract. So with a regular contract, you can deploy contracts with your own code. When we get rid of the ability to load stuff into memory and do a create, we lose the ability to do the create the current way that AA contracts do, which is to load it into call data, have your contract pull it off call data. They'll call it a deterministic deployer. So we need to have some way that we can reference a contract that is not known to the EVM at the time. And since we can't do that with memory, we have to do that pointing to a transaction. Does that make sense, or do you need a different approach?
Yeah, no, I understand it as just a way to get them to feature parity in a way, right?
Right.
Yep.
In theory, in the abstract, I understand that as a nice goal. Although there's another way, right? Which is you deploy a factory first and then you do a delegate call into it.
Yeah. This way there's less stuff left on the chain.
Yeah. So just want to understand the proposal.
Sorry. Yeah, you mean deploy a factory which does an EOF create, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is very expensive because the EOF create needs to, the factory needs to contain 100% of the code that you're planning to deploy. So you pay the biggest cost, which is the 200 gas per word or byte, I don't remember, twice, effectively.
Right.
And you would have to have an EOA transaction in the mix too.
Yeah. So what would be the proposal to put forward then?
we probably need to write up a separate, rather than having in the EOF create EIP, we need to take what was in there for TX create, move it to a new EIP to create TX create. And that's something that we can add to the proposals for Osaka, is to add TX create. And then I think we need to update, I don't know if we want to update as part of that TX create, or we just update in general the hashing of EOF create. And then as part of the TX create, we could put a couple of toehold contracts in for TX create. And then from those toehold contracts, we can create all the magical things we need with ERC. I think we want to limit the number of ones we put in by mandate. One that is like salt plus address, and the other one that is just salt. And from one that's just salt, we can deploy all the other bevy of what people would need. You know, saltless create that tracks the nonces. Any other guarding, if they want to mix in the sender address into it or not, we could deploy those from there. So I think it would be 2 toehold contracts is also what we would put in the EIP, and then we could add all the other interesting factors off of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That sounds like a good idea. We need to be remember all the arguments for TX create that we have talked about right now. But we have the recording for this, so I guess that won't be, we won't miss this. And then that would be a strong case for TX create. That would be great.
So this is TX create, the opcode, the new transaction type, plus at least 1, maybe 2 pre-deploys to do. Is that's specifically for multi-chain deployments?
Well, so
right?
it would come in as part of the EIP, and then from that, so this RIP that I showed, where was it? So this particular RIP, they're trying to standardize what the pre-deploys are, and they're settling on the 4. So we could, whatever's in ERC could come in there, but if we put the required contracts in the EIP, then any chain that claims Ethereum compatibility would have to add those to their pre-deploys. And because they're mostly derived from Geth or Nethermind or Besu or Reth, they would use their existing mechanisms to do the upgrade as part of the specification. So it would just be part of Osaka. Use upgrade to Osaka, and then magically 2 contracts show up at 2 magic addresses.
Cool. And so this new EIP just becomes like the EOF version of what you're showing on screen now.
Right. It would be the first 2, and then the ERC. Once we get the two toeholds, you can create whatever standard sets you want off of those, and anyone can run those transactions because you got the right toehold.
Do we want to support legacy at all? Or maybe I missed something. Does this ERC number RIP, sorry, 7740?
RIP 7740. So what's interesting about this RIP is it depends on the addresses are what's on mainnet. These are for contracts that have been deployed on mainnet. And
Right.
it's saying the argument is you make those a pre-install with their mainnet address.
Yes, that's clear, but that's for legacy, right? Because we don't have EOF
It's
yet.
for legacy. Right.
So we are making a case for those pre-installs for legacy. Maybe we should only be making a case for pre-installs for EOF at different addresses, of course.
I'm using this as a precedent to say it's been done before and it's been standardized.
Okay.
We would make this just for EOF.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so I guess this is a viable plan A. Maybe we should also have a plan B, which is in case there's, we don't manage to get TX create in. What would be the next optimal design? But maybe this is too early to talk about this. Let's prepare the TX create proposal first.
I don't think we put too much effort into plan B because we are the headliner for Osaka, us and Pure Das at the moment. I think we got the space to say we need to get in what we need to make this work. I think the only reason we had to pull this out of Petra was the arguments that there's too much. And if it's too big, then we're going to be pushed after Merkle and after, another series of blob increases, and we chip sometime in 2030. But now that we have headliner status for Osaka, I think we have a lot of room to move and say we need this for the quality solution.
Okay. Okay, we'll I guess know in a month or two what's yeah, if it's feasible or not.
Yeah, I think we go along assuming that this is the plan of record. Okay.
What was the is there a chosen scheme for EOF create?
So I mean, technically, but this is just my writing here. The scenario 1B, which is TX create with irregular state change. Thank you. Does list the EOF create, which is hashing using the proposed by Charles way only sender plus salt. And it's the same for TX create, which grants us code non-observability and also, well, what else? Well, it gives this is the most flexible way that one can write EOF factories, I guess, which has a certain appeal.
Yeah, while still preventing collisions between deployers.
Yeah. So yes, if anyone, so assuming we go with TX create with an ISC, if anyone has arguments for against the letter C in that combination of solutions, which is EOF create hashes with Ketchak 256 sender and salt, then maybe we should, yeah, please go ahead and give arguments and comments, and maybe there's we decide on a different way. But for now, I guess we can try to assume that we do this kind of EOF create. What we call it instead? Sorry, there's a question from Fran. You can call it an ISC.
Yeah, don't you say a pre-deploy?
Okay. Yeah, let me make a thought note. Pre-deploy or pre-install, because you have to. Okay, I'll change it later.
I think in the notes there was something about the compilers should provide good defaults, and I think since there's no equivalent to create one, I think it's totally reasonable to not expose a default salt to the user. So it's just like salt is a required argument for all. I mean, it's just exposed as a required argument to the user for all creations.
And it's actually an argument for adding a third pre-deploy, which is an address-based notes told.
I mean, you mean something that keeps track of nonce? I mean, the user can do it too. Like it would just force them to actually do it explicitly.
Right.
But I think Pavel pointed out on a previous call that like we actually don't need nonce anymore.
Right. If you need saltless deploy, you would use one of the ERC contracts probably explicitly, and maybe that could be weaved into the compilers.
Yeah, I mean there actually is no saltless deploy anymore because there's only create 2.
Well, you would call into an ERC contract that keeps the nonce tied to your account and uses that nonce to seed the salt.
Right, but I mean, from the EVM perspective, there's no nonceless deploy. I mean, there's no
Right.
saltless deploys. So it's
Right. That would be a Solidity Viper level.
yeah, it's an application level. It's
Mhm.
weird for compilers to assume ERC existence. Yeah, the compiler doesn't have to do it. I think it just like completely forces the semantics into user space, which is a kind of a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, we can circle the drain on this before we actually ship because we got at least until June. I mean, maybe the goal is to have this spec totally locked down, never going to change by June, late May, early June. So this, might be the last thing we settle on when we see what people's use is going to be. Okay. I don't think we're going to have time to get to Osaka 1 spec change list. Is there anything else we want to talk about on the EOF create stuff? I think we got a good solution here. Cool. Anything else we want to talk about before I close the call? All right, hearing none, and as people are starting to drop off, I'd like to thank everyone for their time. I think we had a really productive meeting. Excited to see the ship this year. Thanks.
Yep.